Hello everyone, my name is Sana Khan Yusufzai and I'm a Microsoft certified trainer at GTechLearn. Today I'm going to deliver a webinar on the topic Azure Identity Services. This webinar will be of 45 minutes and in the last 5 minutes we will be seeing the questions and answers round. So let's discuss the agenda of today's webinar. First, we will be seeing the top level concepts of Azure Identity Services. Then we will see a practical. We will do the demo on the Azure portal to make the theoretical concepts which we will be seeing in the webinar more clearly. And then we will be seeing the questions and answers round. The concepts which will be covered in the coming few minutes of this webinar will be Azure Active Directory. We will be seeing what is Azure Active Directory and how it is different from the Active Directory which is used on Windows. Then we will see the difference between the authentication and authorization. Then we will be seeing single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and finally conditional access, which is role-based access control capability provided by Azure. First thing is why we need to study about the identity services. See, suppose there is any organization which is trying to migrate its infrastructure from its on-premises data center to the cloud. So it needs to transfer its data, its application and services all on the cloud. But the main thing which comes into the mind of any organization or you can say any user is the first thing is security, that whether translating this whole system or migrating this whole system to the cloud from the data center will be secure enough or not. So the cloud platforms, which the cloud service providers, especially in our case, we are studying about Azure. Azure is a cloud computing platform which is provided by Microsoft. The cloud provider will ensure your security by providing various identity services like before moving to the cloud and accessing all the services and capabilities of the uh, cloud computing system, you have to prove your identity. Then only you will be able to log into the system on the cloud. So there are various services provided by Azure to authenticate your ID, and then after the authentication is done, the access is granted to the user accordingly. So for that identity purpose, there is an directory in Azure, which is known as Azure Active Directory. And Azure Active Directory is basically an identity and access management service which is provided by Azure on the cloud platform. We will discuss all these things in the coming few slides. Let's move to the first topic of today's webinar, which is Azure Active Directory. So Azure Active Directory, as I have just told you, it is a cloud-based identity and access management service. That means it is used to authenticate your identity and then grant you access for the various services based on your identity. If we see here, if we move to a little previous years, if we move back to the time when Microsoft introduced the Active Directory in Windows 2000. That time, Microsoft introduced Active Directory to give organizations the ability to manage the multiple on-premises infrastructure components and systems, and that was done by using a single identity per user. That means on Windows it was an Active Directory which is used on Windows, and for per user a single identity was provided so that the user can manage the multiple components on the on-premises infrastructure. Now we can say that Windows Server is providing an identity and access management service on the Windows Server, and that identity and access management service is managed by the organization itself. Fine. That means Active Directory, it is running on the Windows Server. It is providing the identity and access management service, and it is managed by your own organization. Now let's move to the Azure Active Directory and see the difference. Azure Active Directory, it is provided by the Microsoft cloud computing platform. It is also a identity and access management service, and it is managed by the cloud computing platform Azure itself. So with Azure Active Directory, you see that you can control the identity accounts, and that too globally. That means you can do this work globally. When you secure your identities on the on-premises with Active Directory, what happens? Because you are using the Active Directory on Windows Server, and that is securing your, that is an identity and access management service that is going to secure your identity on the premises on the data center. Microsoft is not monitoring your sign-in attempts, but if you want Microsoft to monitor your sign-in attempts, then what you have to do, you have to connect your Active Directory to the Azure Active Directory. Once both these directories are connected, now Microsoft can help you protect your sign-in attempts by blocking all the unusual type of sign-in attempts from unexpected locations or from unknown devices. So it is very efficient. The system will work more efficiently without any security risks if we are going to connect the Active Directory, which is running on the Windows Server, with the Azure Active Directory, which is running on the cloud. If we connect both these directories, it will be a very secure system. And how we connect both these directories? For that, we will be using Azure Active Directory Connect. Here you see that Azure Active Directory Connect is used to connect both these directories. What will happen when you connect the Azure Active Directory? The Azure Active Directory Connect is a tool which we are using to, like connect both these directories, Windows Server Active Directory and Microsoft Azure Active Directory. What will happen once you use this Azure AD Connect tool? It will synchronize the user identities between the on-premise Active Directory and the Azure Active Directory. And also it will synchronize changes between both the identity systems. That is why you can avail all the features of single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, self-service password reset under both the system, because now both the directories are connected. So you can use these capabilities under both the system. What is self-service password reset? Let me talk about it shortly. This SSR, that is SSPR, that is self-service password reset, it basically prevents the users from using known compromised passwords. That means the passwords which can be harmful for you. It prevents the users from using those compromised passwords. So here you can see a diagram that how your Windows Server Active Directory is connected to the Microsoft Azure Active Directory using this Azure AD Connect. And it will synchronize the user identity between the on-premises and on the cloud. So coming to the next, you can see in this slide, we talked about Azure Active Directory. Now, who is going to use this Azure Active Directory? For whom it is very necessary, or for which class of people it will be an efficient tool to use Azure Active Directory. The first, the IT, if you talk about the IT administrators, then IT administrators can use this Azure Active Directory to control access to the applications and resources, which depends on their business requirements. Second comes the app developers. The application developers, they can also use the Azure Active Directory to provide a standards-based approach for adding any type of functionality to applications which they are building, like adding the single sign-on functionality to an app, or enabling an app to work with the user's existing credentials, so they can use all these services of Azure Active Directory. Then the third one is users. Users can manage their identities like For example, if we say self-service password reset SSPR, it enables the users to change or reset their password without any involvement from the IT administrator or help desk. So if this SSPR facility is available, there is no need to go to the help desk or the IT administrator and ask for any help to change your password. The user himself is capable enough to use this capability of SSPR and change his password. Thus, it is minimizing the time involved in all this process and making your system more secure at the very lowest hierarchical level also. Then online service subscribers like Microsoft 365, Microsoft Office 365, Azure, Microsoft Dynamics CRM online subscribers, they are already using Azure Active Directory. Whoever is on these platforms of Microsoft, whether it is 365, Microsoft Dynamics CRM, which is customer relationship management, they all are using Active Directory. What is a tenant? If we see, tenant is a very important term. It is a representation of an organization, and a tenant is typically separated from other tenants and has its own identity. Means each tenant will have its own identity. And if we talk about Microsoft 365, Office 365, Dynamics CRM, online tenant, they are automatically an Azure Active Directory tenant. So these are the people for whom Azure Active Directory will be very helpful. Now, what services, if we see, does Azure Active Directory provide? The basic services provided by Azure Active Directory is authentication, then single sign-on, application management, device management. Let us discuss about all these four services quickly. Authentication, because Azure AD is an identity and access management service, it will verify your identity first and then grant you access to the various services which is available on the Azure portal. And it will also include functionality like SSPR, like MFA, which is also known as multi-factor authentication. Then there is a custom list of banned passwords, which if you use a password from those banned password lists from those banned passwords list, then Azure will alert you and ask you to change your password. Then you have single sign-on. Single sign-on means you will be using a single username and password to log in to all your devices, so that you don't have to keep the burden on yourself of remembering different passwords for different applications and devices. Then application management service means you can manage your cloud and on-premises applications by using the features provided in Azure Active Directory. Like if we talk about, for example, features like there is application proxy, there is SaaS apps, then the My Apps portal. So these are provided to manage the applications between the on-premises and on the cloud. Then comes the device management service. So along with accounts for individual people, Azure AD also supports the registration of the devices. That means the devices also needs to authenticate themselves when they will connect to the Azure portal. So this allows for device-based conditional access policies. Like there are user-based conditional access policies. Also, there is device-based conditional access policies to restrict access attempts to only those devices which are known, and rejecting the request from all the unknown devices. So device management is also a very pretty feature which is provided by Azure Active Directory as a service. Now moving next, we will be seeing the difference between authentication and authorization. Now, what do you understand by authentication? See, it's a process of establishing the identity of a person or service that wants to access a resource. Like someone wants to access a resource on the Azure portal, first he has to establish his identity on Azure, then only he will be granted access to access that specific resource. So it involves the act of challenging a party for legitimate credentials. Like you have to provide a legitimate credential before going to access the service on the Azure portal. It checks whether you are the same user who you are trying to prove. Like if you are giving the right credentials, then that means you are the right user and access will be granted. If you are providing the wrong credentials, that means you are not the desired user, and in that case Azure Active Directory is not going to provide you the access to use its services. So this is authentication, that is the process of establishing the identity of a person or a service. If we talk about authorization, it establishes the user's identity. No, authentication is establishing the user identity, but authorization is the process of establishing what level of access an authenticated person or service has. Suppose in authentication, the authentication was successful. Now what happens in authorization? It will see that what level of access is Azure going to provide to the authenticated person or service. So before moving to authorization, first the user or device needs to be authenticated. Once the authentication is checked and the credentials are met and Azure is ensured about your identity, you will be provided the authorization where you will be given the access to use the services, like which services you use, what level of access you will be given to use those services. This is authorization basically. It specifies that what data you are allowed to access and what you can do with the data. So this is also a complex process. If you see here in this diagram, it is very clear. For authentication, you are providing your identity card. If the credentials are met, you are granted the access. Now let us move to the next slides. You have already seen that how we can connect the Active Directory with Azure Directory, and that was by using Azure Active Directory Connect tool. Now let's come to Azure Multifactor Authentication. Multi-factor authentication means, suppose we are signing in on Facebook, you have to require a username and password to log in. You required using those username and password. Now in the second step, you are again asked to provide a code which is sent on your registered mobile number, or you are asked to give your fingerprint scan which you have already uploaded on the login page. So these additional authentication techniques, other than providing your username and password which is coming, these are all example of the multi-factor authentication. Means there will be multiple steps to prove your identity. This is done so in order to make the system more secure. Suppose if someone comes to know your username and password, then it is very easy for that person to log into your system. But suppose if you have also put on an additional step, like that after providing the username and password, you will get a code on your laptop, on your Gmail account, or you will get a phone on the authenticator app, then what happens, that person needs to have access to your account, Gmail account, or your phone. So that condition is very rare. So providing this multi-factor authentication is enhancing the security level to a very topmost level. That means chances of security breach is becoming less. Now, what what are the techniques we are using for multi-factor authentication? If you see here, there are three techniques. So the first is something the user knows. That means simply the email address, the username, or the password. These things the user knows himself. Though they are very prone that some other person can also know your username and password. So first thing is something you know, then something the user has. Like this can be a code which is sent to the user's mobile phone, or on the app, or on the Gmail account, or on some Microsoft account or Yahoo account, any type of account you could have. That means some type of code is sent to the mobile phone number or the email account or on the app of the user. That code needs to be entered before signing into your system. So this is that something the user has. Now the third thing is something the user is. In this scenario, the user has to provide some of his biometric property, like either he has to give his fingerprint scan or a facial scan or a retina scan to log into the devices. So this is something the user is totally based on the biometrics property. So if you see, you are providing the username and password here. Again, a key is coming into your mobile phone, then you are providing your facial recognition or biometric recognition, and then you are able to use the service. So this whole process is increasing the security by limiting the impact of credential exposure. Like stolen username and password is a very common scenario these days. So in order to decrease the chances of such conditions, you should use multi-factor authentication. Now next, let's come to the conditional access. Conditional access, it is also a tool which Azure Active Directory uses to allow or deny access to resources based on identity signals. That means there are identity signals. When these signals are generated, the Azure Active Directory checks for these signals, then it makes the decision that whether the access will be provided or not, and then those access settings is enforced on the resources, because it is not necessary to provide all the access to all the resources in any organization. Like if there is a HR department, there is an administrative department, there is a development and testing department, and we need every department to be unique in themselves. That means we don't need that these departments interfere with each other or access with the data of each other. So by applying tags on those departments and by providing role-based access control to those departments, we can stop the system from messing up because of the like messing up of different departments. So this tool is very important because it is providing a more granular multi-factor authentication experience for user. Now let us take an example and understand this in a more better way. Suppose a user might not be challenged for second authentication factor if they are at a known location. However, they might be challenged for a second authentication factor if their sign-in signals are unusual or they are at an unexpected location. So during sign-in, conditional access will collect the signals from the users, make decisions based on those signals, and then enforce that decision by either allowing the access request or by denying the access request, or challenging for a multi-factor authentication process. So conditional access helps the ID administrators to empower users to be productive whenever and wherever, and it also protects the organization assets. Now, when we talk about conditional access, we are applying a limited source only to a specific user. We are allowing a limited access to the resources to the users. The access only which the users need is provided to them, and rest of the access is blocked for them. Like if the administrative department, suppose, has to access the documents of the finance department, he will not be able, the administrative department will not be able to access the documents of the finance department, because there a conditional access policy has been set up that the administrative department can only deal with the documents of that department itself. If it needs further access to the other departments, it needs to place a request, and then in that case access settings will be changed and then access will be provided. Like the administrative department will generate a signal, and then decision will be made according to that whether access will be denied or access will be granted. So when should you use conditional access? See, conditional access is useful when you need to require multi-factor authentication to access an application. Then in that case, conditional access is useful. Like you can configure whether all users require MFA or only certain users, like such as administrators. So in that case, if you see that MFA is a very rigorous process, so applying conditional access can save you from doing all those MFA processes. Like for you give the access of MFA only to the administrators and keep all the other users out of that MFA, because administrators, they have their reach to the very confidential documents. So those administrators need to provide MFA, while all the other users, they will not be providing the MFA. So for that case, conditional access is useful. The second case when is conditional access is useful is require access to services only through approved client applications. Like for example, you might want to allow users to access Office 365 service from a mobile device as long as they use approved client apps like the Outlook mobile app. So in that condition also, conditional access will be useful. Third, you can require users to access your applications only from the managed device. Managed device means a device that meet your standards for security and compliance. Then it is used to block access from the untrusted sources, like access from some unknown location on from unknown device. All such type of access will be blocked when you are using the conditional access. Now conditional access is only available with the Azure Active Directory Premium P1 and P2 license. And also if you have a Microsoft 365 Business Premium license, you can have all access to the conditional access features. So this diagram is now all clear. You can see signals, and then you see that verifies every access attempt, and then apps and data. The same things which I just explained, like signals, then decision making, and then enforcement. Manage access with role-based access control. Okay, now we will be seeing the practicals for this. Let me share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay, let me take you to the Azure portal. The practical which I am going to perform is, this is the GitHub page where you can see the different practicals. Now I am going to show you how to manage access with role-based access control. First, we will view and assign the roles. That is, I'm going to create a resource group in the Azure portal, and then I'm going to assign a role to that resource group. And then I'm going to check the monitor the role assignments, and then see that when the role was created and all the other settings. So let me take you to the Microsoft Azure portal page, that is portal.azure.com. Now here I have to create a resource group. You can simply type here in the service led resource group. I have already created the resource group, so the services is showing here in the recent section. Let me take you to this resource group. Here I'm going to create a resource group. Let me name it as RBAC resource group. Okay, the location is East US, no need of tags, though you can provide tags. The name of this resource group is RBAC RG. The resource group is created. Let me take you all directly to the resource group from here. Okay. Now see, this is the home page. Here you can see the subscription, the tags. I haven't added any tags, so it is not showing here. Deployments, no deployment. The location was East US. The resources, because I haven't deployed any resources in this resource group, this section is also empty. You can create resources from here. What I have to do, I have to use access control for this resource group. So from here, you will go to access control section. Simply here you can see check access, role assignments, roles, deny access assignments, classic administrators. First, let me see if there is any policy set or not. So you can see role assignments, we have 0, deny assignment 0, only the service administrator role, which has full access to all resources in the subscription. This is the inbuilt role is there. Now I'm going to add a role assignment. For that, grant access to resources by assigning a role. Let me click on this add role assignment. Whatever role assignment you want, you can type here and get to it. So a role definition is a collection of permissions. You can use the built-in roles or you can create your own custom roles. So I'm going to use the built-in roles. Suppose I'm going to use the role virtual machine contributor. See, it's already here. Virtual machine contributor. What does it do? It lets you manage virtual machines, but not access to them and not the virtual network or storage account they are connected to. So in the description section, the work of this virtual machine contributor role is very clear. This is a built-in role and the type is category. You can also view the details from here. See, the permissions given by this role, all the permissions is mentioned here. So you can also see the JavaScript object notation of this role, then the assignments from here. No results because I haven't used this assignment on any of my resource yet. Let me close it. Now I'm going to use this virtual machine contributor role. Next, if you want to select members, you can select the members from here. I am going to select this member, shwanakhan05@outlook.com. Let me select. So this name, you can see the member I have added. You can delete it from here as well. Let me take to the next and review and assign the virtual machine contributor role on this member. Okay, now it was, see, this account was added as a virtual machine contributor for the resource group RBAC RG. Let me take you back to the overview section. Let me refresh this. And let us check for the access control now, that whether the role access was implemented or not. View my access. You can see here the role assignment which was showing 0 is now we have a new role assignment which is virtual machine contributor. Description is given. It is the scope, that is where the role we have applied, scope where we are applying the role. So this is scope is this resource. Okay, let me close this and now we will see the activity logs. Let me take you to the activity log. Subscription is Azure Pass, severity all time span last 6 hours. You can also change this from here. Okay, then resource group, add filter. Here you can select operation and you can write here what you have selected. Create role assignment. Create role assignment. So this is still loading. I got this role. Let me check on this. No results to display. Let me refresh. No results. Okay. It is still not updated. Let me take you back on this section, on the activity log section. Because we have applied, it should appear here. Let me, because it takes some time to implement, no need to worry about that. Operation. Create role assignment. Okay, it is still not appearing. Okay, let me show you from here. When you have to monitor the role assignments, you go to that resource group, then you go to the activity log blade, you add filter, select the operation and then create the role assignment, and then your activity log for that role assignment is displayed. If you come back here, see in the overview section, go on the access control, you see your access, that what role you have assigned, virtual machine contributor role. It is showing here, that means the role is already assigned to this scope. Okay, let me close it. You can also delete the access. I will show you how to delete. First, let me take you to the activity log. Okay, let me do it once again and see whether it is updated now or not. It takes some time to implement the changes. This was added as virtual machine contributor for RBSC. No problem. See, now we can see. I told you it takes some time to show it here on the portal. I have created the operation name was create role assignment. Status was succeeded 4 minutes ago on Thursday, and thus we can go to this and show you that how we have created this role assignment. Now let me close it and go back to the access control section. Can go to this role assignments, and you can delete this assignment from here. So you can also delete the role assignment if you want. And how you can create, how you check the activity log, and how you deleted the role assignment, we all this was seen in this practical. Now let me stop sharing my screen and take you back to the PPT where we will discuss the question and answers. The practical was clear that how we granted access. So you saw that how identity and access management service, that is Azure Active Directory, is identity and access management service by Azure. How we can apply different roles to different users. And now, okay, this URL will take you to the upcoming events by our organization GTechLearn. You can also scan this QR code and see the list of the upcoming events by GTech. Well, thanks for attending this webinar. Let me take you to the questions and answers round quickly. Okay. So the first question is here. In an organization, how can the IT department reduce the number of times users must authenticate to access multiple applications? Okay, so the best solution to this question is, because you want to reduce the number of time the user is signing in. For that purpose, we will be using the capability of single sign-on. SSO, it enables single sign-on is also known as SSO. It enables the user to remember only one ID and one password to access multiple applications. That means providing that same ID and password, the user will be able to access multiple applications and services on the Azure portal. This is done so because sometimes generally it happens that people forget that username and password if there is different username and password for different applications and services. So better use a single password and username and then use it for signing in to multiple applications. So SSO is the best solution to this question. Now next is, how can the IT department ensure that the employees at the company's retail stores can access company applications only from approved tablet devices? Okay, so the best solution is by applying conditional access. Conditional access will enable you to require users to access your applications only from approved and managed devices, because the devices are, because we have created a role-based access control methodology. By using this conditional access, you will grant specific access to specific users only. So the solution to this question will be conditional access. Next is, how can the IT department use biometric properties such as facial recognition to enable delivery drivers to prove their identities? Okay. So the best factor in this case will be, the best solution will be multi-factor authentication, that is MFA. Authenticating through MFA will include something that user knows, something the user has, and something the user is. So if the IT department wants to use the biometric properties like facial recognition to enable the delivery drivers to prove their identities, then the best technique is that the IT department should use the technique of multi-factor authentication. And they can use the facial recognition to enable the delivery drivers to prove their identities. So that was all about today's webinar. Thank you for attending. See you all soon in the next webinars by our organization GTechLearn. Thank you so much.